Hi, I'm Kendra Corman. If you're a coach, consultant, or marketer, you know marketing is far from a perfect science. And that's why this show is called Imperfect Marketing. Join me and my guests as we explore how to grow your business with marketing tips and, of course, lessons learned along the way. Hello and welcome back to another episode of Imperfect Marketing. Today, I'm excited to be talking to Nikki. Today, Nikki and I are going to be talking about NLP, which I used to think was natural language paragraphs, or programming, but it's Neuro-Linguistic Programming. So how did you get into this?
Well, I actually got into it from the work that I was doing. So I was a professional sales rep by trade, and I am always looking for ways to up my game. And realistically, how I really got into it is I was sitting in one of my mentors' office and I was lamenting about something that was going on in my kind of experience. And she made a comment about something around what I was saying and my body language. And she said, there's a real incongruency here. And I was like, what do you mean incongruency? Body language? Like, what are you talking about? So she started explaining that she had studied neuro-linguistic programming. Body language is a big part of it. And so I got really curious about it, started reading books on body language. And then about, a few weeks later, she called me out of the blue and said, hey, I'm going to take a storytelling workshop in the Redwood Forest in Northern California. Do you want to come? Now, I mentioned a couple times she's my mentor, right? So I'm like, yeah, I want to go anywhere you're going to be and get to spend a week with you. And in the Redwood Forest, that sounds cool. Storytelling, I don't know, but we'll see. And so we did. We went to this workshop. It was a week-long workshop. And it turned out that the person who was teaching the workshop was an NLP teacher. And so I had a really great experience at her workshop learning about storytelling. And in there, during one day at lunch, she offered for those of us who wanted a little bit of extra coaching from her around, learning how to tell a story well, that we could stay at lunch and she would do some individual coaching with us. And when she was doing her individual coaching with me, she made a comment about something that I was doing when I was telling the story. And she said, try this other thing. And so just to kind of get into the details, the weeds here, she was commenting around the fact that I was smiling the whole time when I was speaking. And, I'd been in sales for many years at this point and
You're
had a lot of
supposed to
success.
smile, right? That's what you're trained to do. Even when you're on the phone, you're supposed to smile so they can hear the smile in your voice.
Exactly. And I grew up in an environment. I was raised by my dad. I have 3 brothers, and I was always the smile, told as a girl, smile, be pleasant. And so when she said, did you know that you smile the whole time you speak? I was like, yes, this is one of my superpowers, smiling. And she said, well, what would happen if you relax the muscles in your face and just spoke? And then the rest of the people that were, also stayed during lunch, they were like, oh, so much better. So when I got back the next week and I was back out on the road doing presentations, I remember at a presentation, somebody came up to me afterwards. And again, I was using this, letting the muscles in my face relax and not smiling the whole time. And a woman who was in the audience, and there was probably 40 people. And there were quite a few of us that were presenting that day. And one of the women in the audience came up to me and she said, man, when you speak, you are so credible. And I was like, whoa, this is great feedback. So I dug really deep. I started studying NLP with this teacher. I used to, for 2 years, 1 weekend a month, get on a plane, go spend the weekend studying NLP. I became a master practitioner. She ended up moving up to Washington State, where I was living at the time, a few years after, and asked me to start assisting her on the side. So I was using what I was learning, in my sales career and having a lot of success with it. And then I started assisting. So at this point, I have over 1,200 classroom hours in NLP. And just to give some comparison, most people that have the same certification that I do have less than 40. So it's pretty intense, the amount of time and what I've dedicated. I would say I like to go deep. I like to really learn things, and it takes me a long time because I'm not a fast learner. So yeah, and that's how I got into it. And I've been able to incorporate it into what I do now, which as a sales strategist and coach, I can help my clients from the sales side, but bringing my NLP experience in to really build stronger communication and connection with people that they're interacting with.
That is such a cool story. I mean, starting off with your mentor and then taking a trip and then, having one tip even, right, that really changed things. That's huge. And I feel like I need to massage my cheek muscles so that they can relax, but I don't know if they do that because I'm so used to smiling all the time whenever I'm like, camera light, go. But yes, no, I think that is just so cool. And so now you're a sales strategist and your company is your Sales Maven, I think.
Sales
Right?
Maven.
Sales
Yeah.
Maven? Okay. And we'll definitely always, as always, have contact information for Nikki and her company in the show notes. So be sure to check that out. So you sort of glazed over it a little bit, but what is NLP and what isn't it?
So, Neuro-Linguistic Programming, neuro stands for, it really represents the way you process information in your brains, the way neurons are firing, connections are being made. And linguistics is language. So, that is the way you speak, the way others speak to you, the patterns that we have around that, any internal dialogue you have. And then the programming is about habits and patterns, because realistically, most of us show up and communicate from a place of a pattern, a habit. And so when you can start to understand what is going on with the way you're communicating and the way the other person's communicating, you can start to you can pick things up, but you can also learn how to make some adjustments. So I would say it's the study of communication. That's the most basic way to explain NLP. And it's learning how to adjust your style of communication to make it more comfortable for the other person to be in conversation with you. So, for instance, if you've ever been, you met somebody for the first time and you feel that instant connection, like you have an hour-long conversation, you look down at your watch and you realize we've been talking for an hour, but it feels like 5 minutes because it's been so easy. Those are people who you kind of naturally fall into this connection, and it's easy to be in conversation with them and it feels really good and you enjoy it. And you almost get this experience of I don't know where you've been all my life, but I feel like we were just destined to meet, we were just meant to know each other, right? Now, on the flip side of that, you meet somebody who has a very different style than you, and it can be kind of exhausting to be in conversation. So you have a 10-minute conversation with this person and it feels like it's been 2 hours and you feel like you need a nap after that conversation. That's somebody who has a very different style. And so it takes more energy to be in a conversation with somebody who has a very different style than you. So the way I bring this into my work is learning how to make adjustments. And this applies also for your clients that are really interested in the marketing aspect of it as well, is that it's learning how to adjust your style. It's learning how to write copy. It's learning how to put content out into the market that attracts your ideal client in a way that it's oh my gosh, Kendra is speaking right to the heart of my issue, my matter, the things that were really important to me. And also at the same time, it allows you to repel the people who aren't a good fit. So they're not sucking up your time. They're not, getting onto your email list and causing it to, get so big that now you have to pay all this extra money for people who are really not ideal fit for you. So that's how I bring it into my work.
So you talked about smiling and then you talked about copywriting.
Okay.
So those sound two different
Very
things.
different. Yeah.
How is it both? Or is it?
Well, the body language. So if you think about, there was a study done years ago around the way in which we communicate. So if you think about a pie chart, right? So I think I heard on a podcast that you love Excel. Is that true?
I do love Excel.
Okay. I thought I heard you say that. So,
I do love Excel.
So you're probably familiar with the concept, right? A pie chart, right? You can make really cool pie charts in Excel. So they say you can break communication down into 3 main categories. So we're communicating in multiple ways all the time. So these 3 categories of communication, there's the words, That's one way of communicating, the words that you actually choose. And then there's your facial expressions and your body language. That's another kind of category. Facial expressions, body language, one category. And then third category is voice quality. So that's your cadence, your pitch, your like how fast you talk versus how slow you talk, like all these things. So we've got these 3 slices of pie in the pie chart. Okay. Now, when you are communicating live in person with somebody, you have all 3 slices of pie to use. And these categories, they say that 55% of communication is facial expressions and body language. So that's a pretty big chunk. So this idea of like smiling versus not smiling, this is one that will impact that body language. So if you're in person with somebody or on video and they can actually see you, this will really it will really matter. Okay. So that's 55% of the 100% of communication. Now, the next category, the big category, is voice quality. So they say that's 38% of your communication. So if you're only on a phone call with somebody, for instance, or they can just hear your voice, on a podcast, for instance, you're really only working with that 38%. Now, there's things you can do with your voice that will sometimes depict like, oh, it sounds like Kendra might be smiling right now, or, oh, it sounds like she's like kind of teasing a little. Like we can do these things with our voice and inflection, right? And then when it comes to copy, you've got, I don't know if you've figured this out yet, but you really only have 7% left of the total communication, and that's your words. Now, there are things that you can do with the words when you're writing copy that will repel people and or attract people, right? Like we want to attract our right people. We want to repel the people who are the wrong people. And this is where it really matters, because if you only have 7% of all of communication to work with when you're writing copy or when you're putting out marketing content that is just words, those words that you choose, they really matter because they're doing all the work that your facial expressions and your voice quality, they don't even get to contribute, right? So it's learning how to adjust, again, make some adjustments to how you're showing up and what is the message that you're trying to get across, because you can say something live in person to somebody that might come across like, if you didn't have inflection in your voice and they couldn't see your face, they might think like, dang, Kendra's being harsh. But because they can see your voice, they can hear your voice, because they can see your face, they might go like, oh, she's being playful, right? But when you're writing it, if they're reading it as, wow, she's harsh, like that's not a good thing if you're trying to attract somebody. So the words that you choose really matter when it comes to copy.
And I think one of the things that I picked up on that I think is so important is that you want to repel the people you don't want. You are not for everybody. You shouldn't be for everybody. If you try to be for everybody, you're going to fail, right? Because you don't want to repel the right people because you're trying to attract them, right? You'd rather repel some other group of people, right, that aren't the right fit rather than trying to like walk some middle line. And I think that that's so important to note, and that your word choice does matter with that. So let's talk about NLP and marketing. What are some tips to better understanding how you can leverage it with marketing?
Well, one is that it's the way that you phrase your benefit statement, for instance. So when you're talking about what are people going to get out of this program that you're offering, for instance, one of the things that can happen is we have what's known as motivational traits, and there's different motivational traits and they're context specific. And, there's a lot that goes into this, but I'm going to give you the very general kind of overview that will be helpful, even if you just take away this, right? And you don't go deep into it. But one motivational trait is that certain people are motivated towards having something. They want to accomplish something. They want to be successful. They want to achieve something. That is that toward motivational trait. And that can show up in language. And I'll give you an example of it in just a second. Now, the opposite, and this is on a spectrum, by the way, like, one side is going to be toward, and on the other side of the spectrum is the away from strategy, motivational trait. The people that want to avoid having something bad happen. They're sick of dealing with X, Y, and Z. They're ready to let go of. Those are the people that are motivated, that really resonate with that language. They're motivated away from something, right? They're ready to get away from something. And the one example I heard years ago, it's like some people will run their fastest to win a gold medal, whereas other people will run out flat out fastest to get away from a German Shepherd, right? Like, and you might be thinking in certain contexts, but for you, it might be one or the other, or you might fall somewhere in the middle of the spectrum. Now, in your marketing copy, what can happen is your strong motivational trait will show up in the way that you write your copy. And the drawback to that is you might actually be eliminating a good portion of your ideal clients because you're not speaking right to the heart of the matter. And because you don't necessarily know, oh, well, my people are only toward people, which is fine if that's the case, but that's rarely the case. And so if you write in a lot of toward language, like the benefit of this program is you will achieve this X level of success. And another benefit of this program is you will have a new sense of confidence, right? These are all toward type statements. But if somebody's like, I don't know if I believe that. I don't know if I can really achieve that. I don't know if I'll really be confident. They'll doubt that in the marketing, right? And so it won't ring true to them. Now, if you're willing to put in some away from language and not just write all toward language, then it might start to give some wiggle room. It might be for the person who is more motivated to the away from will be like, you'll stop second guessing yourself. Right? Which you can also say like being confident and second guessing yourself are kind of the same thing. But when you think about who is going to be attracted to that language, it's not always the same. So you want to learn how to alternate your copy. And so usually I will say, if you're going to have, let's say 5 bullet points as far as benefits of a program, you want to have kind of a mix, right? So you might have 3 one way and 2 the other. So I tend to write towards, that's the easier for me. I'm more motivated towards achieving versus, the like, which I think in marketing, you hear this all the time is people are always like, focus on their pain points, right? Like hammer home those pain points. But if I only see away from language in marketing, it feels very negative to me and it doesn't attract me. I'm okay with a little bit, but if it's all like, you won't risk, getting cancer because you're eating X, Y, and Z, and you'll stop, feeling bloated all the time. And like all these away from statements, like, it's like, but what's the good? What's the upside here? This is all just the downside stuff. So we want to mix and match. So again, if you're going to have 3 towards statements, you should have 2 away from, and or vice versa. Whichever way feels easier to you, that's okay. But you do want to have a mix in your messaging because it rings more true to somebody that will fall somewhere on that spectrum. And you won't be eliminating the people who have that little bit of, kind of are drawn one way or the other. And that doesn't make them necessarily an ideal client or not. Now, if you only want to work with high achieving people, which we see all the time in marketing, but for some people that feels unrealistic. Now, it doesn't mean that the person that you're going to work with doesn't want high achieving, but that language may not really speak to the heart of them. So it doesn't mean they won't be a good client. It just means that you need to have some flexibility to your copy. And I will say that when I think about NLP and when I teach and the work that I do, I always go back to my all-time favorite quote. This to me really speaks to the heart of what I'm kind of talking about here, which is, "Blessed are the flexible, for they shall not be bent out of shape." And what I'm suggesting is to learn how to add some more flexibility to how you're showing up in a room. Because if you show up in a room, and you've probably experienced this, where somebody kind of walks into a room or they walk into a conversation with you and they just have this attitude of like, hey, this is me. Take it or leave it, but I'm not going to change. And this is who I am. Now, when we see people like that and we experience that from the outside, we look at those people and sometimes we think like, ugh. I push away from that, right? Like I'm like, ugh, that person's coming on a little too like, they think they're the end all be all and everybody else is wrong, right? Like that doesn't feel good. So when you can add some flexibility to the way that you are marketing, it shows that you can kind of speak to the heart of anybody's matter. And again, I'm not talking about like, I still believe in repelling people. Like I want to be really clear about this, but let's not eliminate or have people self-select themselves out of your offer because you only use motivational traits that speak one way or the other. Add some flexibility, and you'll find that that flexibility will allow for your ideal clients to show up more fully because it's you're speaking more to the heart of where. And we're not all one way or the other. We tend to fall kind of somewhere in the middle of the spectrum or somewhere on the spectrum one way or the other. But we can't just say it's all or nothing. Because if it's all or nothing, people will opt out.
Well, I think it depends too, again, on where they're at in their buying journey too, as to what they're feeling. If they're ready to pull out that credit card, that, away from pain point might really be the thing that puts them over. Whereas another person might be really excited and really focused on investing and, the pain isn't, what's getting them there. It's the opportunity, right? And so having that balance, I think, is really important. And I think one thing to note is, we talked about repelling some people and attracting others away from and toward messaging doesn't change that person, right? It just talks about their motivation. And so you can still have a person that leans towards one or the other and still be your ideal client. And I think that's really important. So can you give me a couple of examples of some strategic word choices? I know you gave us a little bit here, but
here's a big one in marketing. And I know I'm speaking to a marketing expert, so, push back, that's totally fine. I'm speaking at this from a sales standpoint, and I'm speaking at it from an NLP standpoint. Okay. So one of the ones that is way overused in marketing, and I would really encourage people to take a step back and really look at this, is there's this little word that marketing people love to use, and the word is if. Now, I'm not saying this is not a hard and fast, like never use if in any of your marketing. But when it comes to helping people make the choice to buy, to sign up for the program, using if is a mistake. And the reason is because we say things like in marketing, we'll write in our copy like, if you're ready for X, Y, and Z, do this. Well, what you're really saying to the brain is, hey, slow down. Think about it. Are you sure? Are you sure you're in? And when somebody is ready to buy, you shouldn't be slowing down the process. So instead of using if, like, if this resonates with you and you're ready to make a change, do this, right? Instead, just say, ready to make a change, do this. That's what's known as an embedded command. And it takes that like forward momentum, like, okay, I'm ready. Yes, now I'm supposed to do this. It's not like, hey, think about it. Are you sure? Because that's not going to help you in your marketing. So this if statement, I'm not a fan of. I am also not a fan of using if when it's like, if you agree with these, bulleted list here, then this program is for you. If you want this, then here's this program. If you are tired of that, here's this program. I actually want you to use when instead. I think it's stronger. I think it separates you from all your competitors out there who are all using if, and it says when you're wanting this, when you're tired of that, here's the answer. Because it's when is this, like when this happens, I am now making the decision. I'm ready to take that next step. Not if, not think about it, not like, are you sure? No, it is all about when. Do this. So that's another example is this if versus when. I'm a big fan of when, and I think you'll find if you insert when instead of if, and if you go back and look at your sales pages, look at your last, email promotion.
I have 4 sales pages with if all over. So go ahead.
It's so common, right? Like, and this is not I'm not bashing anybody who uses it because everybody uses if. Like, it's such a common phrase, but I want you to stand out, right? Like we want you to stand out. We want you to make it easy for people to say yes to signing up for your thing or buying this or buying that or making this change in their life that they're ready to. So if you go and look at your statements, your if statements, and you just put when in there, I will say that 90% of the time, when works just as well and better.
All right. So I'm definitely got some homework to be checking that out after this. This has been a fantastic conversation. I really appreciate your time and how deeply you're sharing about this, right? Because I think it's so important to know really word choice matters. I mean, we're in a world of AI. I love AI. I shout it from the rooftops. It saves me a ton of time, but it's not always doing the conversion, right? You have to edit, you have to personalize, and you have to know enough about your audience to really be able to make it work for you. And I think a better understanding of language, right, of communication, and specifically what we were talking about with NLP or Neuro-Linguistic Programming, I think it's very important that people acknowledge that AI is part of that, but you're really going to add that difference maker. You're going to really create that balance. You're going to attract and repel the right and wrong people with the edits that you make to the content that AI creates for you. And I think, again, I think that makes it just so important right now. Now, before I let you go, I do have a question that I ask all my guests, and that is, this show is called Imperfect Marketing because marketing is anything but a perfect science. What has been your biggest marketing lesson learned?
My biggest marketing lesson learned is that the reason that I market is for the ideal buyer, for the person who is ready to take action. And just to explain what I mean by that is I find that a lot of times people hold back putting content out into the market, putting their offer out into the market, to marketing themselves, because they think, well, I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, or I don't want people to judge me, or I don't want people to think I'm being, salesy or too aggressive. But you aren't marketing for the people who aren't ready to buy. You're putting yourself out there and you're marketing for the person that it's like, oh my gosh, like, Kendra, where have you been all my life? I've been waiting for you and I needed this right now, here today. And it's because you marketed it, because you put yourself out there, that this is available and that I can have some solution that I'm looking for in my life. And so I get over very quickly the, like, I'm worried about people's judgments and I'm, concerned that, oh, if I send this email, people are going to unsubscribe. I don't care anymore. I send the email for the person that's like, Nikki, I've been waiting for this offer. And I put myself out there in the podcast and in the content that I put out into the marketplace. And whether people agree with it or don't agree with it, it's not for the person that's like, oh, well, I have a different opinion and I'm going to clutch my pearls and be offended about something that Nikki's saying about sales. That's not who I'm marketing for. I'm marketing for the person who's like, finally, here's somebody who's talking about sales in a way that resonates with me. And I feel like I could learn something from her and I need her in my life. That's who I'm marketing for.
Okay, so I love that because it's not perfect. Marketing is not perfect. That's why the show is called Imperfect Marketing, right? You got to go with it too. You may not be sending that email because you're worried again about what you said, people judging you. And, is it ready enough? Is it polished enough? Are they going to think, something's wrong with my hair or my voice or whatever it happens to be, right? I've said this numerous times because I heard it on a webinar. This is like, I don't know, 4 or 5 years ago now. And this woman's, you're just not that important to me. It's like, yes, exactly. You're just not that important to me. And so when you take that view of it, you are that important to someone else, and not your hair or your voice or anything like that. But you're that important to somebody when it comes to if they're ready to buy, right? If you've got the right fit for what they need, they will be so happy that you just sent it. They're not going to be judging all of those other things because, really, you're not that important, right? To them, they're important to them. So, and what they've got going on is what's important to them. And I think that's a really, really good marketing lesson learned for everybody. So not if, but when you are ready to reach out to Nikki, be sure to check out the show notes. She also has a little freebie offer for you guys there too. That's there. And I always close the show with if. So because you learned something today, we're just going to skip when and go with because you learned something today, it would really help me out if you would rate and subscribe wherever you're listening or watching. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Imperfect Marketing, and have a great rest of your day.